Stella always thought of Ellicott City as the kind of place where nothing extraordinary ever happened. The lawns were trimmed, the mail came on time, and neighbors waved from driveways before retreating into their quiet, predictable lives. Yet even as a child, she sensed something mysterious beneath that calm, a silence that hummed between fences and windows. Their house stood across from Mr. Brownlee's. He was a polite, soft-spoken man with silver-streaked hair and almond-shaped eyes that revealed little emotion. Every morning he swept his porch as if performing a ritual. Stella would watch from her bedroom window before school, curious about the lonely man who lived alone in a house filled with books, potted plants, and faint music that sometimes drifted into the street. Her mother, Shirley, always spoke kindly of him but never warmly. "He's a good neighbor," she would say, in a tone that closed the subject. Her stepfather, Johnson, would just nod and turn back to the newspaper. As a little girl, Stella had once brought him cookies for Christmas. He'd smiled, his eyes crinkling. "Thank you, Stella," he'd said softly. "You remind me of someone I used to know." Then, as if catching himself, he'd changed the subject to the weather. Years later, as she stood in her childhood neighborhood again, now a grown woman married, holding the hand of her husband, Reuben, Stella found herself staring at that same porch. It looked smaller now, almost fragile. Mr. Lee's curtains were drawn and the porch light flickered like a heartbeat. Reuben squeezed her hand. "You okay?" She nodded, though a strange ache lingered in her chest. The street hadn't changed much, but something inside her had. She couldn't name it yet, that whisper of connection, that quiet pull toward the house across the road. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen blinds, painting thin stripes of gold across the table. Reuben set down a small, neatly wrapped box beside Stella's coffee mug. "Happy birthday," he said, grinning like a boy with a secret. She laughed. "You already got me flowers yesterday." "Yeah, but this one's fun. Open it." Inside the box lay a DNA ancestry test kit, sleek, white, and completely unexpected. Stella raised an eyebrow. "You're kidding." Reuben shook his head. "Nope, I did mine last year. Turns out I'm 1% Viking. You've always been curious about your family roots. Thought we could do yours too." She turned the box in her hands, amused. "You know my roots, Reuben, half Asian, half white, simple as that." "Maybe," he teased, "but what if there's more, a lost royal lineage or an ancient warrior clan?" She smiled, rolling her eyes, but later that evening curiosity won. She followed the instructions, sealed the small tube and dropped it in the mailbox on her way to work the next morning. It felt oddly intimate, sending her DNA into the unknown. Weeks passed. Between deadlines, errands, and dinners with friends, she forgot about it until the email arrived. "Your DNA results are ready." Stella clicked the link casually, scrolling through percentages of ancestry. China, British, a trace of Native American. Nothing surprising until the bottom section appeared. Close family match, Brownlee, parent 99.9%. Her hand froze on the mouse. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The name blinked at her like a cruel mistake. No, it couldn't be. "Mr. Lee, her neighbor." She whispered his name again, as if saying it aloud might make it make sense. But it only echoed louder in her head, a truth so impossible it felt like fiction. Reuben's voice drifted from the other room. "Hey, you okay?" She didn't answer. She just stared at the screen, at the name that had quietly lived across the street her entire life. The name refused to disappear, no matter how many times Stella refreshed the page. Brownlee, parent. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. There had to be some kind of mix-up, a glitch, maybe even a cruel coincidence. She clicked the help icon, reread the explanation. A parent match indicates a 99.9% probability of biological relation. Her breath hitched. She could almost hear the world narrowing to silence. "Stella," Reuben appeared at the doorway holding a dish towel. "You look pale, what's wrong?" She turned the laptop toward him with trembling hands. He leaned in, frowning as he read the name. "Brownlee," he murmured. "Isn't that your old neighbor?" "Yes," she said faintly. "It says he's my father." Reuben blinked, searching her face. "That can't be right, maybe the database." "I checked twice," she interrupted. "They verified it." Her voice cracked. "Reuben, this isn't some stranger, it's him." He knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Let's think this through. Maybe there's some connection, like he's related to one of your parents." She shook her head, tears threatening. "My dad, Johnson, he raised me since I was 3. but Mom would have told me if there was anyone else. Wouldn't she? That night, Stella couldn't sleep. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the wind brushing against the window, every sound seemed too loud. She opened her phone and scrolled through old photos of her childhood home. There he was, faintly visible in the background of a neighborhood barbecue, standing near the fence, smiling politely at the camera. Her mother's smile in that same photo looked tight, almost rehearsed. The thought pressed cold against her chest. If the test was right, if Brownlee was truly her father, then her whole life had been built on a quiet lie. And somewhere, deep down, part of her already knew it was true. By morning, the disbelief hardened into anger. Stella dressed quickly, barely tasting her coffee as she told Reuben, "I'm driving over to see my mother." He hesitated, concern clouding his eyes. "Maybe wait, Stell, you're still." "No, I need to hear it from her." The drive to her parents' house felt longer than usual. The streets of her childhood blurred past, the playground, the church, the oak tree she used to climb, all suddenly carrying a new, uneasy weight. When Shirley opened the door, she smiled automatically. Stella, what a surprise. Her mother's hair, still a soft chestnut despite the years, was pinned neatly. She smelled faintly of lavender and starch, the same scent that had always meant home. "Mom," Stella began, her voice trembling, "I need to ask you something important." Shirley's smile faded. "What is it?" Stella held out her phone. "I took a DNA test. It says Brownlee is my biological father." The silence that followed was sharp and heavy. Shirley's hand froze on the doorframe. For a moment her expression didn't change, only her eyes widened, then dimmed. Finally, she whispered, "Where did you get that information?" "From a DNA company," Stella said. "It's accurate, I double-checked." Shirley pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "No. That can't be right, that's impossible." "Mom," Stella said, her voice rising, "just tell me the truth, please." Before Shirley could answer, Johnson stepped into the hallway, his face drawn. "What's going on?" Stella turned to him, her throat tight. "Did you know?" He looked at her for a long moment, his lips parting, then closing again. He didn't deny it. And that silence, that awful, confirming silence, was louder than any confession. Shirley sank into a chair, whispering something too soft to hear. For the first time in her life, Stella felt like she was looking at strangers, two people who had raised her inside a story that was never truly hers. That evening the house felt heavier than ever before. The faint ticking of the wall clock filled the room like a metronome, marking the silence between them. No one spoke. No one ate. The roast chicken on the table went cold. Shirley sat rigid in her chair, her fork untouched, her eyes red but dry. Johnson kept his gaze fixed on his plate, turning his wedding band round and round with his thumb. Stella sat opposite them, hands folded, pulse hammering in her ears. Finally she said quietly, "So it's true." Shirley's lips parted but no sound came. It was Johnson who finally broke the stillness. "Yes," he said, his voice low, "it's true." The words struck like glass shattering in her chest. Stella stared at her mother. "How could you not tell me?" Shirley flinched. "You were a child, you wouldn't have understood." "I understand lies just fine," Stella snapped. "You let me grow up believing Johnson was my father. You let me wave to Mr. Lee every day without ever saying," her throat tightened, "without saying he was my father." Shirley pressed her palms together. "I did what I thought was best. Your stepfather raised you, loved you. Brown," she hesitated on his name, "he and I made mistakes. I didn't want you to suffer for them." Johnson finally looked up. "We agreed never to tell you," he said. "It was meant to protect you." "Protect me?" Stella gave a hollow laugh. "From what, the truth?" No one answered. Only the sound of the old refrigerator humming filled the pause. After a long silence, Shirley whispered, "I loved you more than anything, Stella. Please believe that." But Stella couldn't speak anymore. Her voice had turned to stone. She pushed back her chair, stood up and said quietly, "You should have believed in me enough to tell me who I was." Then she walked out, leaving the dinner untouched, the silence behind her louder than ever. The next morning, Stella drove to Ellicott City with her heart pounding like a drum. She hadn't planned it. She simply woke up, threw on a jacket, and found herself steering toward the street that had shaped her earliest memories. Mr. Brownlee's house looked almost the same. The porch rail was freshly painted white, the rose bushes neatly trimmed. Only the air around it felt different, heavier, charged with something she couldn't name. She hesitated before knocking. For a fleeting moment, she imagined the door opening to the same calm smile, the same soft voice that used to ask how school was. Except now, everything was different. When the door finally creaked open, Mr. Lee stood there, thinner than she remembered, a grey cardigan hanging loosely over his shoulders. His eyes, still gentle, widened slightly. "Stella." She managed a nod. "Hi, Mr. Lee, I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," he said, stepping aside. "Come in." The scent of jasmine tea and old books filled the house. Paintings lined the walls, landscapes, portraits, scenes from faraway places. She remembered peeking at them through the window as a girl, always wondering about the stories behind them. He poured her tea, hands steady but quiet. "It's been a long time," he said. "How are your parents?" Her throat tightened. "They're fine." Then after a pause, "Mr. Lee, I took a DNA test." He froze, the teapot Medea. Slowly he set it down. "I think you already know what it said," she continued softly. "It matched you to me." He looked down, his shoulders sagging as if the air had suddenly grown heavy. "I was afraid this day would come," he whispered. Tears strung her eyes. "So it's true." He met her gaze, the same eyes, she realized, the same shape and quiet sadness. "Yes, Stella," he said finally, "it's true." For a moment after he spoke, neither of them moved. The words hung in the air, fragile, dangerous, impossible to take back. Mr. Lee sat down slowly, his fingers trembling as he reached for his teacup. "I wanted to tell you so many times," he said softly, "but I didn't have the right." Stella's voice wavered. "The right, you're my father." His eyes flickered with pain. "Your mother asked me to stay away. She said it would only confuse you. I respected that, though it broke something in me." Stella looked around the room, her gaze landing on a small painting by the window, a little girl chasing butterflies. The child's curly hair and brown skin looked achingly familiar. "You painted this," she said. He nodded. "When you were 6, I used to watch you play in the yard, so full of light. It was the only way I could hold on to you." She remembered those afternoons, riding her pink bicycle, seeing him sweep his porch, always there, always quiet. She'd wave and he'd smile, but her mother's voice would call from the kitchen window, "Come inside now, Stella." She never understood why. "I thought you just liked kids," she whispered. He gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "I liked you. You were my only child. I watched you grow up through glass, unable to touch, unable to speak the truth." Tears welled in her eyes. "All those years, birthdays, school plays, you were there, weren't you?" He nodded. "Every time I could be, I'd park a street away. I just wanted to see you laugh." The ache in her chest deepened into something unnameable, grief for what never was, for what could never be returned. She stood to leave, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what to feel." Mr. Lee's eyes glistened. "Neither do I, Stella, but I'm glad you came." The drive back from Mr. Lee's house felt endless. The world outside blurred, trees, street signs, and the pale grey sky melting into one long stretch of confusion. Stella's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. When she finally reached her mother's house, she didn't bother knocking. The door creaked open and Shirley looked up from the couch, startled. "Stella." Her voice was sharp. "I went to see him." The colour drained from Shirley's face. "You shouldn't have." "I had to," Stella said. "I needed the truth and he gave it to me. Why didn't you?" Shirley stood, shaking her head. "You don't understand what it was like then. I was young, lonely. Your father, Johnson, was working long hours. Mr. Lee was kind. He listened." Her voice cracked. "It wasn't supposed to happen." Stella's eyes burned. "But it did, and you lied to me for 30 years. Her mother's composure crumbled. She sank onto the couch, covering her face with trembling hands. "I was terrified," she sobbed. "I thought I'd lose you or him or everything. I told Johnson and he promised to stay on one condition, that we'd never tell you." Stella stared, stunned. "He knew." Shirley nodded through her tears. "He raised you as his own, Stella. He loved you. We both did. I thought keeping quiet would protect you." "Protect me from what?" Shirley looked up, eyes red and swollen. "From a truth that would have torn this family apart." The words hit hard, but all Stella could feel was the sharp ache of betrayal. "I had a right to know who I am," she whispered. Her mother reached out, pleading. "Please, Stella, I made mistakes, but you were born from love. That's all that matters." Stella stepped back, shaking her head. "No, Mom, what matters is the truth, and you buried it." As she turned to leave, Shirley's sobs echoed through the house, a sound raw enough to break something deep inside both of them. The house felt colder than usual that night. Stella wandered through her old bedroom, its walls still painted pale yellow, the faint scent of childhood clinging to the corners. She had come to collect a few things she'd left behind, or so she told herself, but really she was searching for something she couldn't name. Drawers opened and closed. Old school papers, faded photos, a cracked jewelry box, everything looked smaller, less certain. Then, in the bottom of a dusty shoebox, she found it. A photograph. It was from a long-ago summer picnic. She recognized the park instantly. In the center stood her mother, smiling tightly, arm around Johnson, and just behind them, slightly out of focus, was Mr. Brownlee. He wasn't smiling for the camera, his gaze was fixed on Shirley. There was something unmistakable in that look, not casual friendship but tenderness, longing. Stella's stomach turned. She traced her mother's face with her thumb, noticing how her expression, though cheerful, carried the faintest sadness, a woman caught between two worlds. Footsteps echoed softly behind her. She turned. Johnson stood at the door, his face drawn and tired. "You found it," he said quietly. She held the photo up. "You knew about this?" He nodded. "I remember that day. He came with us, said he wanted to help with the church fundraiser." A pause. "They thought no one noticed." Stella's throat tightened. "And you just accepted it?" "I loved your mother," Johnson said simply, "and I loved you, that was enough." "But didn't it hurt, knowing she loved someone else?" He sighed. "Every day. But love isn't always clean, Stella, sometimes it's just survival." She looked back at the photo, the quiet man in the background, the woman smiling through secrets, and the little girl in front, unaware that her whole world was built on borrowed truths. For the first time, Stella realized she wasn't just uncovering a secret. She was standing in the wreckage of 3 broken hearts. Stella returned home, exhausted and emotionally raw. Reuben was waiting in the living room, arms crossed but eyes full of patience. "How bad is it?" he asked gently. Stella sank into the couch, burying her face in her hands. "Everything I thought I knew, it's all a lie." He sat beside her, hand on hers. "It's not a lie, Stell, it's truth, and truth is something you can carry, we'll carry it together." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "But I feel angry, betrayed by everyone." "I know," he said softly. "But your parents made mistakes, they didn't stop loving you, and now you know the truth, you can decide what to do with it." For the first time since the revelation, Stella felt a small flicker of calm. Reuben's presence reminded her she wasn't alone. "I don't know if I can forgive them," she whispered. "You don't have to yet," Reuben said. "Just start by understanding, the rest comes later." The next morning, Johnson appeared at Stella's door. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice trembled. He explained everything, how he knew about Shirley's affair with Mr. Lee, how he promised to keep the secret, and how he raised her as his own despite the betrayal. "I loved you," he said, choking. "And I still do. I made a choice to protect you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day you'll understand." Stella listened, heart pounding. The man she had thought of as her father was also a victim of love and circumstance. Confusion and sympathy warred in her mind. Stella returned to Mr. Lee's house to find him thinner, frailer. The news of his illness hit her like a storm. "I didn't want you to know like this," he said, voice weak. "Cancer, it doesn't wait." She held his hand tightly. "I'm here now, we'll face it together." For the first time, she realized the urgency. She had limited time to understand him, to know the father she had missed. Days passed in quiet conversation. Stella and Mr. Lee sat in his garden, drinking tea and recalling moments she never knew she shared with him. "I watched you grow," he said softly. "Every scraped knee, every birthday, I wanted to reach out, but your mother." Stella nodded. "I know now, and I'm angry, but I want to understand you too." They laughed at small memories, cried at lost years, and slowly built a fragile bridge over decades of silence. Mr. Lee handed Stella a small, worn box. Inside were letters, some addressed to Shirley, some never sent. "They're all truths I couldn't speak aloud," he said. Reading them, Stella discovered moments of love, guilt, and regret she never imagined. She saw her mother's decisions in a new light, choices born of fear, longing, and human weakness. The letters revealed more than Stella expected. Shirley had once planned to leave Johnson for Mr. Lee but backed down at the last moment. Each line dripped with longing and fear, love tangled with guilt. Stella traced her mother's handwriting, seeing the woman behind the careful facade. She wasn't perfect, Stella whispered to herself, but she loved me. Mr. Lee watched her silently. Love is messy, he said, and sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that protect others. Stella folded the letters carefully. A small, uneasy understanding settled in her chest. Among the letters was a small envelope, yellowed with age. Inside was a note about a baby, a son Shirley and Mr. Lee had lost at birth. Stella read the words again and again. She had a half-brother she never knew. A family connection severed before it even began. I never knew, she whispered. Mr. Lee's hands shook as he touched hers. I thought of him every day, he said softly. And now I think of you. The grief was sharp, but Stella felt a strange comfort. She was not just uncovering secrets, she was discovering the depth of love that had always surrounded her. Stella returned to her mother, letter in hand. I know about the child, she said quietly, and your plan to leave Johnson for him. Shirley gasped, tears streaming. I was so young I thought I could have it all, but I was scared. I chose stability over desire, over love for you, Stella. Stella's anger softened, replaced by a complicated empathy. I understand why you made your choices, but it still hurts. I know, Shirley said, and I'll carry that forever. Tensions flared at home. Reuben worried Stella was losing herself in the past. Johnson left the living room in silence. Shirley avoided her daughter's gaze. Stella felt torn, anger, grief, love, and curiosity collided. She wanted answers, yet feared the consequences. At night she lay awake, Mr. Lee's letters scattered across her bed. The truth was out, but the healing, the reconciliation, felt impossibly far away. When Stella returned to his house, Mr. Lee handed her a small leather-bound journal. These are my thoughts, he said. My confessions, my regrets, the moments I watched you grow in secret. She opened it gently, reading his voice across the pages. His love, guilt, and longing bled from the ink. Every sentence pulled her closer to the father she never knew, yet had always been a part of her. As Stella read, she discovered a revelation Mr. Lee had never shared. He had tried to approach her as a child, leaving gifts and letters, but Shirley had intercepted them. Every small gesture of connection he made had been blocked, leaving him silently watching from a distance. Her chest tightened. He tried, she whispered. He really tried. The weight of stolen moments pressed on her. She realized the father she longed for had always been near, yet she had never known him. Tears blurred her vision, but the pain carried something new, clarity. Mr. Lee's condition worsened. Stella found herself at his bedside, the steady beep of the monitor echoing in the quiet room. I didn't want to fail you, he whispered, gripping her hand. I wanted to be the father you deserved. You are my father, Stella said, tears streaming, even if it came late. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet tears. For the first time, Stella felt their bond, fragile, new, and painfully real. The past could not be erased, but their connection was no longer a secret. Mr. Lee reached for a small canvas beside the bed. It depicted a young girl chasing butterflies in a garden. I painted this for you, he said softly. Stella traced the strokes with her fingers. I remember you were always watching me. Yes, he admitted, voice faint, and I loved every second of it, even from afar. Stella's heart ached. She wanted to forgive him for the years lost, and somehow, seeing his love captured on canvas, she felt the first stirrings of release. He passed quietly one morning, holding Stella's hand. The emptiness in the room echoed the years of absence, but his final presence, steady and warm, offered her closure she hadn't imagined possible. She sat with him, whispering, "Thank you for everything." The grief was sharp, raw, but beneath it grew a fragile thread of peace. The funeral was small, attended mostly by neighbors and a few family members. Shirley stayed home, unwilling to face the man she had loved and lost. Stella delivered the eulogy, her voice steady. She spoke of love, regret, and the father who had shaped her silently. Standing by his grave, she realized grief and forgiveness could coexist, that loss didn't erase love. After the funeral, Stella returned to Ellicott City. The whispers of neighbors followed her. Curious glances, hushed conversations. Some offered sympathy, others judgment. She felt exposed, as if the past had finally bled into the present. But for Stella, the murmurs were small compared to the revelations she had already faced. They didn't know the love, the regrets, or the quiet sacrifices that shaped her childhood. Walking past Mr. Lee's empty house, she whispered, "I'll remember you always." Back at home, Reuben's patience frayed. Stella's obsession with her past, the letters, the journal, the photographs, left little room for their present life. "I understand," Rubin said one night, frustration creeping in, "but you can't live in the shadows of the past forever." "I need this," Stella replied, her voice trembling. "I need to understand who I am." He sighed, taking her hand. "Then I'll follow you no matter how far it goes." For the first time, Stella realized she didn't have to face her tangled history alone. Johnson packed a small bag and left for a few days. His absence was quiet but heavy, a reminder of the fractures within the family. Stella felt conflicting emotions, sorrow, relief, and a strange sense of freedom. She had space to process, to think, to breathe. Before he left, he turned to her. "I hope one day you'll forgive me, I tried." "I know," she said softly, "and I will in time." Weeks later, Shirley fell ill, a sudden, frightening illness that forced Stella to confront her feelings. The woman who had kept secrets, who had shaped Stella's childhood, now needed her care. Stella spent hours by her bedside, holding her mother's hand. She realized that love, despite betrayal, endured. Sometimes forgiveness wasn't just about them, it was about Stella finding peace for herself. One quiet evening, Shirley spoke freely for the first time. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. "I thought keeping the truth hidden was protecting you. I see now it only hurt us all." Stella nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand why you did it, and I forgive you, but I needed to know everything to reclaim my story." Shirley reached out, their hands meeting. "I'm proud of the woman you've become." For the first time in decades, Stella felt a bridge form between them, fragile yet strong enough to begin rebuilding trust. Mr. Lee's house was up for sale. Stella walked through each room one last time, memories spilling from every corner. His careful paintings, the little trinkets he had left for her, the garden where they had shared tea. She took one last look at the porch, the place she had watched him from as a child. The empty house symbolized loss, yes, but also the love that had quietly shaped her. She carefully took his favorite painting, the one of her chasing butterflies, and promised herself she would keep it, a reminder of the father she had finally known. That night, Stella wrote a letter to Mr. Lee, pouring her heart onto paper. She told him about her grief, her gratitude, and the years of lost time they could never reclaim. She folded it carefully, placing it in a drawer she would never open. It was a farewell she didn't need to send, a private closure between a daughter and the father who had loved her from the shadows. Johnson returned home. Stella and Shirley had already taken steps toward forgiveness. And now the fragile family began to mend. "Welcome back," she said softly, embracing him. Johnson held her close, and for the first time the years of secrets felt lighter. They weren't erased, but the threads of understanding and love allowed them to begin again. Rubin stood nearby, smiling, knowing Stella had grown through pain into resilience. Stella and Rubin drove to the hilltop where Mr. Lee had loved to paint. The wind swept over the grass, carrying the scent of summer. She scattered a small portion of his ashes, feeling the finality of goodbye. Yet instead of emptiness, she felt a quiet strength, a connection that death could not sever. "I miss him," she whispered. "And he loved you," Rubin said, "always." Back home, Stella began writing her memoir, recounting the truths she had discovered. The letters, the journal, the conversations with her parents, each word helped her reclaim her identity. She realized that forgiveness wasn't a single act but a journey, one that allowed her to step out of shadows and into the light of her own story. Standing in her backyard, Stella looked toward the street where her childhood unfolded. The shadows of secrets and lies had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. She thought of Mr. Lee, Shirley, Johnson, and even the child she never met. Love, flawed and human, had guided her. She breathed deeply. The past was behind her, the present in her hands, and the future hers to create. For the first time, Stella smiled freely. She was whole.